Okay. Let's see. Touch a few things here. All right, welcome. Welcome. All right. Got Linda here. I know John was there for a second beforehand. All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, so let me get my camera on. Okay, there we are. I can see me. Okay. Okay. All right, close that up. All right. Okay, welcome to Freedom from Cancer. Tough subject. Not an easy subject to deal with and contend with sometimes. So it's a very, very tough subject. So it's something that's scary to a lot of people, and it's costly, and it's devastating in a lot of people's lives and families' lives. It's a very, very powerful and very impactful topic. So today we're going to talk about freedom from cancer. I want to share a couple stories to get started off. So for me, my introduction to cancer began when I was, let's see, let me check my view here. Hold on, gallery. No, that's not right. So my introduction to cancer began when I was in working in the hospital. So I was a pathologist assistant, and I had worked a little bit as a phlebotomist, drawing blood on people who had been in the oncology ward, but it was very different for me to actually see cancer, to see the ravages of cancer. And so it was very interesting for me when I became a pathologist assistant and when I started doing autopsies. So one of the things that was really very fascinating for me was to be able to see cancer up close and personal in people who had just passed away from complications of cancer and other chronic diseases as well. And I saw colon cancer because I had dissected the entire intestinal tract of people. And I got to see the polyps and the cancers inside the digestive tract. One of the cases was rather gruesome for me. It was a case of squamous cell carcinoma. And squamous cell carcinoma is probably one of the most devastating types of cancer because it basically, once it becomes metastatic, it goes everywhere in the entire body. And so every organ of this person that we did the autopsy on, every organ was infiltrated with this squamous cell carcinoma everywhere. So basically the person suffocated to death from all of these squamous cells infiltrating every organ. So it was rather interesting to see all that. So it was powerful to see cancer from that perspective. And it's been powerful for me to actually work with people who have had cancer and being able to empower them using lifestyle medicine to be able to either reverse or delay or prolong the recovery of it so that they could actually live a longer life. So it's been amazing. One of the stories I'd like to share with you is that of Bob. I want to talk about Bob. So Bob is a remarkable man, an executive, owned a company, very successful in the Chicago area. And I've known Bob and worked with Bob on various health issues over the years for over a dozen years. And then he called me up and he said, Ruben, I've got an issue. I went in to get a checkup, and they did a CAT scan on me to see if there's any metastatic prostate cancer. And so they didn't see any of that, but they did see pancreatic cancer. And so they're proposing to do surgery, a procedure called the Whipple procedure. And they're giving me about 6 to 10 months to live. And I'm wondering if you can help me. And I said, Bob, I said, we've talked about your lifestyle before, and I want to know, are you willing to be completely coachable? Because if you are, then we can go to work on this. We can make this happen. And he said, you know, I'm motivated now. There are 3 weddings off in the future that are family weddings that I want to be there for. And I've got grandchildren coming into the world, and I want to be there for that too. I said, okay, let's make it happen. So we went to work. And what I'm going to share with you today is everything that I share with him. And we went to work in changing his entire lifestyle. So I'm going to share with you everything that I've shared with him. And well, actually, there's more that I've shared with him, but I'm going to share the whole context and the framework of everything that I share with him. And then when we get to the end of the session today, I will share with you the rest of the story. As some of you may remember Paul Harvey. And so I will share with you the rest of the story about Bob and what's happened as a result. And it's very inspiring. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to shift over to my, let's see here. How do I do this? I'm trying to think about how to do this. Oh, let's see. I'm going to shift over to my PowerPoint, but I'm going to figure out where. Let's see. Oh, here it is. That's the issue. Okay, I got it. All right, so I'm going to shift over to my PowerPoint. So give me just a moment. And we will make that happen. All right. And I'm so glad that you're here. So glad that you're here. And if you want to ask questions, by all means, do so in the chat window. And then I'll try to get to them. I'll absolutely get to them by the time we finish up. And then in addition to that, I want you to know I'm going to send you a follow-up email. And you're going to get all the slides from today's presentation. You'll get a link to that, and it'll all be in a PDF, so it's really easy to see. And then you're going to get all the resource information. I've got links, I've got videos, I've got articles. Everything is backed up, 100% backed up, all evidence-based. So I'm really excited about this. So I'm really excited about sharing this with you. And you want to be able to share this with your family members. So just so you know, please feel free to share this. Okay, so let's see here. Beginning, and I'll do that. And I click this. And let's see here. Okay, share my screen. And it's this. And I click this. And there we are. Okay, good. We are set. All right, so freedom from cancer. And my name, Ruben J. Guzman, MPH, does not stand for the speed that I drive my car. All right, just so you know. So that stands for the Master's in Public Health that I got from UCLA. My education, my undergraduate education was at Cal Lutheran University in Thousand Oaks, Southern California, beautiful, beautiful campus. And I was a pre-med biological sciences major. And then after that, I worked for a couple of years in the hospital because I was one of those people who worked their way through school, and I paid for everything, working 50, 60, 70 hours a week. I had 5 part-time jobs. So I was a hustler. And I used these 2 years to study for my medical college admissions test. And then I went off to medical school. And it was quite an education for me to work in the hospital for those 2 years as a pathologist assistant and doing everything else in the laboratory. So it was great. When I went off to medical school, It was an incredible education. I learned so much and it was so valuable. But there was something that was disillusioning to me. It was that I was learning a lot about diagnosing chronic disease and being able to manage chronic disease by prescribing medications. That didn't sit well with me. It didn't sit right because I knew that there was a better way. And I just was really convinced that we could actually improve our lifestyle and improve the quality of our life. So I did independent research based on what I'd learned already. And my advisor said, Ruben, you're onto something, but quite frankly, we don't have the resources for you. So he recommended that I go to UCLA and the School of Public Health and then see where that would lead me with the option to come back and finish my training and to become a physician. And so I went off to UCLA, loved my program. It was phenomenal. And when I got done, I was clear at that point that I was passionate about promoting health, and I was no longer interested in treating disease. So I decided to pursue studying lifestyle medicine on my own. There was nothing called lifestyle medicine back then. I was ahead of my time. But I went into, so I chose not to go back to medical school. I went into healthcare administration, did that for over a dozen years, actually was very instrumental in running the hospital at Kaiser Hospital in South Sacramento for several years. And then I went into consulting, but I continued my own independent study of lifestyle medicine. And then in 2016, I went to a conference on nutrition in healthcare. And at that conference, they had a presentation about the latest, newest branch of the American Medical Association. And I didn't know what it was. And it's the newest branch of the American Medical Association, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Wow, I got to check this out. So what is lifestyle medicine? So right from the website, lifestyle medicine is the use of evidence-based lifestyle therapeutic intervention, including a whole food, plant predominant eating pattern, regular physical activity, restorative sleep, stress management, avoidance of risky substances, and positive social connection as a primary, not secondary, not after the fact. No, let's go with this as primary modality delivered by clinicians trained and certified in this specialty to prevent, treat, and often reverse chronic disease. Wow. That's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I was all in. I said, I'm in. And the founders of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine include the likes of Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Michael Greger, Dr. Neil Barnard, T. Colin Campbell, Caldwell Esselstyn, John McDougall, and a whole host of others. Wonderful stuff. I've been following those guys for years. So the American College of Lifestyle Medicine is the primary modality. We're suggesting that let's do this first, medications later. All right, let's do this first. Let's involve all of these spokes of our wheel of health, including nutrition, physical activity, emotional well-being, alcohol, tobacco reduction, healthy relationships, hydration, that's my addition, and then sleep. All of these are important. And Dr. Wayne Dysinger, one of the founders of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, said this, that lifestyle medicine is the foundation of healthcare because 80% of healthcare is chronic disease. I mean, we spend 86% of our dollars in healthcare on chronic disease. 80% of chronic disease is caused by lifestyle. In fact, we say genetics, which is 20%, loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. So if the disease is caused by lifestyle, the foundation ought to be a lifestyle treatment. And doesn't that make sense? Certainly does to me. So I was so excited. I jumped in with both feet, started swimming in lifestyle medicine. I just love it. And in October 2018, I became one of the first board certified lifestyle medicine professionals in the world. I'm so excited. My certificate says 00081. That's my number. So it's really exciting. I found my tribe. It took me 30 years to find my tribe, and it's just been wonderful and thoroughly exciting, thrilling for me. And as a result, I'm also a part of the Institute of Coaching out of Harvard. Many of us in lifestyle medicine are part of this. And it's just very exciting. If you Google my name, yes, it's true. I did write these 3 books in swimming. Yes, I've been a professional swimming coach for over 40 years. And so I wrote the best-selling swimming drill book. Yes, it sold about 552 copies. And that's a joke. So the thing is, it's a swimming drill book, like really, okay. So, but it's really been great. I'm very proud of that. So, but as a lifestyle medicine professional, I get to live into this quote that Thomas Edison said well over 100 years ago, that the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease. And when you think about it, it makes total sense. And this is what lifestyle medicine is doing today. So in addition, I want you to know that I have absolutely zero conflicts of interest, none whatsoever. So I have no products to sell you. I have no supplements. I have no protein powders. I have none of that. I do these seminars for free for 2 major reasons. Number one, I am passionate about eliminating chronic disease from the face of the planet. I've been passionate about this for a very, very long time. Secondly, as an adult and as a father of 4 boys, as a single dad of 4 boys, I feel it's imperative that as an adult that I leave this world in better condition than how I found it, and that I leave the world in a better place for my future posterity, my children, my grandchildren to come, my great-grandchildren to come. So I think it's so important to me. I am clear that I cannot do this all by myself, and I need your help. So I'm hoping that each of you that have joined me or watching this are willing to help me to eliminate chronic disease from the face of the planet and to make the planet a better place for our future posterity. And if you're willing to do that, my request is just one thing. Please share this information widely. Share it with your friends, with your family members, because you may save a life by being able to share this information. I promise you it'll make a difference. That I can absolutely promise you. So please help me. Please help me. All of us in lifestyle medicine are committed to doing this. And I think Virgil was correct when he said well over 2,000 years ago that the greatest wealth that any of us can have truly is our health. Truly is. So let's understand something about this quote. It really is our health, but many people don't see it that way. The challenge that we see is that we live in a world where far too many people don't value their health as their most important asset. In fact, when the Dalai Lama was asked what surprised him most about humanity, he responded by saying that man sacrifices his health in order to make money. How many of us have seen that, where people are working? I got too much to do. I got this project to get done. I don't have time to work out. I don't have time to eat healthy. Man sacrifices his health in order to make money. Then he sacrifices money later on in his life in order to try to recuperate his health. And gosh, I've seen that a lot. And then he is so anxious about the future that he does not enjoy the present. The result being that he does not live in the present or the future. He lives as if he is never going to die, and then dies having never really lived. And the reason we get into this predicament is because of our beliefs. We believe that money is more important than our health. Subconsciously, we just believe that. And in psychology, we define beliefs as simply a strongly held opinion or thoughts trusted to be true, but they're not necessarily the truth. And so we get caught up in our beliefs and we get led astray sometimes. And we don't realize that we're being led astray. In fact, it's interesting how we operate as human beings, because some of us can actually hold on to beliefs that clearly are not correct. And we've changed beliefs over time. In fact, it's rather interesting. There are still some people on the face of the planet that believe that the earth is flat. Yes, they do. They're flat earthers. I've met a few of them. Rather fascinating conversations with them, because no matter what evidence you provide, they will rigidly hold on to their belief that the earth is flat. Rather fascinating. We all get conditioned by our beliefs. Most of us don't realize that we get conditioned, but all of us are conditioned. In fact, I'm going to prove it to you right now, because all of us are. So see if you can complete this jingle. Plop, plop, fizz, fizz. Oh, what a relief it is. Now, if you were able to complete that jingle, consider that you have been programmed by an ad that is no longer, has not played in over 40 years. Oh my goodness. Wow, we get conditioned and we don't realize just how conditioned we are. Advertisers know this, they know the power of it. So a lot of us have mistaken beliefs because of this. Just to give you an example from real ads that actually played. All right, they played, and no, they didn't play on TV. They are actually in the press. So these are real ads that appeared in the press long before our time. So these are real ads. Nico Times cigarettes, the smooth taste expectant mothers crave. Wow. Wow, we wouldn't see that one today now, would we? How about this one? No flies on me, thanks to DDT. Wow, amazing, right? We can't get rid of this stuff fast enough. How about this one from the Bayer Company, their first formula for relieving headaches, heroin hydrochloride. Yes, they sold heroin. Wow. How about this one? Let this magic mineral asbestos protect the buildings on your farm. Now we can't get rid of it fast enough. So should we always trust the marketing, my friends? Consider that the advertisers know how to do this and they know how to do it really well. So we should really question our beliefs. So that's the invitation for us, is to question our beliefs and to pay attention to the patterns of our beliefs, because the ways that we learn to survive may not be the ways we want to continue to live. And will really take us being open-minded to examine those beliefs. One of my teachers, and by the way, I do not claim to be an all-knowing expert about anything. I'm a student, always have been, always will be. So one of my teachers, I asked him if he could make a guest appearance today. He said no, he wasn't going to be able to do that. So I'll try to channel his spirit here right now. I'll see if I can bring him in. You must unlearn what you have learned. Oh, thank you, Yoda. I think you got his message. So we need to be able to unlearn and be an open mind so that we can unravel the mistaken beliefs that we've learned. So here's what we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk about some of the statistics and epidemiology, the patterns of disease relating to cancer. We're also going to talk about the context and the framework for health. How does this context affect our overall health and cancer in particular? Then we're going to look at what actually causes most cancer. So we're going to look at that and the mechanism for that is present in most cancers. And we're going to look at that very, very important information. And then what are the major culprits that are available to us that we can then start to address? I'm also going to talk about foods that promote health, some research, and I'm also going to give you a little bit more information at the end that's very, very powerful. One of the most important aspects when it comes to cancer, based on research as well. All of this is evidence-based. At the end, I will talk to you about how you can make the rest of your life the best of your life. So we'll finish off with that and making a difference. And I will also share the rest of the story and complete the story on my client, Bob, who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So let's dive in. So first of all, let's look at some overall statistics in terms of health in the United States. And it's not very good. So in the United States, heart disease, cancer, and stroke account for more than half of all the deaths each and every year. That's alarming. 86% of our nation's healthcare costs are spent treating people with chronic disease, and it's very expensive with cancer. 70 million Americans have hypertension with elevated risk of stroke and heart attack. 100 million Americans are projected to be diabetic by 2050. 130 million plus Americans, 40% of the population, are affected with chronic disease. And 70% of all Americans are overweight or obese. This is significant when we talk about cancer. I'll come to this and back to this in a minute. So it's very important that we understand that. Now, from the CDC, from the National Cancer Institute, NCI, in 2016, there were an estimated 15.5 million cancer survivors in the United States. The number of cancer survivors is expected to increase to 20.3 million by 2026. That's just 4 years away. Approximately 38.4% of men and women will be diagnosed with cancer at some point during their lifetimes. Wow, that's over a third of the population. That's incredible. That's incredible. So it's interesting when we look at some of the data trends. So trends and death rates from 1930 through 2012 per 100,000 people. All right. And so this is from the National Center for Health Statistics. So we see that this is death rates overall for males in the kind of golden line, and in the silver line is female. All right, so that's the trends in death rates. Okay, so that's what we see. Now, when we look at cancer, here's what we see. This is what's interesting. Estimated cancer prevalence by age in the United States population from 1975 to a projected time of 2040. So what we're seeing is that the prevalence of cancer is increasing in all age groups, all right? So it's rather significant, especially the older we get. Now, if we look at the differences between, this is for estimated new cases for female cancer cases, this is right from the American Cancer Society. So the leading type of cancer for females is breast cancer, followed by lung and bronchus cancer, so the respiratory tract, and colorectal cancer is number 3. So those are the top 3. For males, the top 3 are prostate cancer, number 2, lung and bronchus cancer, and number 3, also colorectal cancer. So that's what we see in terms of the trends and the data from the American Cancer Society. This is very costly. And then there's all the other ones as well. So there's all different kinds of cancers. So according to a recent study published in the American Journal of Medicine, after tracking 9.5 million cancer patients from the years 2000 to 2012, 42% of new cancer patients lose all of their life savings in 2 years' time because of treatment. The average amount a cancer patient lost was $92,000 plus. 62% of all cancer patients are in debt due to treatment. I've seen that far too many times. 40 to 85% have to quit working during treatment. So this was published in October 2018. All right, so just so you understand that. So really, really gruesome statistics, financial. And when it comes to our life expectancy in the United States, cancer deaths, this data absolutely affects our life expectancy. So compared to the other industrialized countries in blue, the United States has flattened out in terms of life expectancy. So we're not doing so well. In fact, when we compare our life expectancy compared to other countries, we rank down here in the red line. That's the United States. All these other countries, by the way, they all do better than us, and every single one of them has universal health care, just so you know. So it's rather interesting. They all have universal health care. We do not. So when it comes to the causes of death, cancer is absolutely number two. Number one is heart disease, but right behind it is cancer. And then those are the other causes of disease, causes of death, excuse me. So those are the leading causes of death published by the Centers for Disease Control. But there is a leading cause of death that's not listed here from the CDC. Johns Hopkins Medical School and Medical Center, they actually did the research on this. So the third leading cause of death is not released by the Centers for Disease Control is actually medical error. Medical error. Wow. Now I can attest to this. When I was in hospital administration, one of my departments was risk management. So every month we would gather files on cases and patients where there had been medical error and there was risk for litigation. And we had a very select committee actually review this information every single month. Yeah, so third leading cause of death is medical error. So I always tell people, if you can avoid getting into the medical system, that's a good choice, especially the hospital. If we look at the patterns of these chronic diseases, part of my research was looking at the geographical distribution of these diseases. I was inspired by Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who wrote the China study. And when I started looking at the geographical patterns of chronic diseases, it was rather interesting. This is straight from the CDC. So the geographical distribution by county of mortality from cardiovascular disease in the United States, here's the distribution. So the orange to red is the highest concentration, the highest rate of deaths per 100,000 population. So if you can see that here, we see that the greatest concentration in the southeast portion of the United States. Well, what's the pattern for cancer? Well, it's fairly similar. So what we see is cancer also, the largest area of concentration is in the southeast portion of the United States. We have pockets all over the place, but this is the largest concentration, this wide swath through the southeast portion of the United States. If we look at, for instance, diabetes, diagnosed diabetes, well, we've got this large distribution right there as well. And then obesity, this is part of my research. What is the connection between obesity and chronic disease? I was looking at that many, many years ago, decades ago. And so it's rather interesting. So the obesity prevalence in the United States in 2013, again, we see this very high concentration through the southeast portion of the United States and other areas as well. But there's this big swath in that area. So as time has gone on, we have seen that there is a correlation between obesity and mortality. So it looks like this. The graph looks like this. So if your body mass index, your height versus your weight, and there's a formula for that. So if your height versus your weight is 20 to 30, your BMI is between 20 and 30, you have the lowest level of risk. But as your BMI goes up, then you start to see progressively increased levels of risk. And there's a reason for this. So in this situation, what we see is that increased level of risk because of obesity. Now here's why. There's two types of fat. Number one is the subcutaneous fat. So these are the fat underneath your skin. That's the fat that you can see, you can pinch. All right, when you pinch your arm, that's your subcutaneous fat that you're pinching. So that type of fat produces estrogens, which are very much implicated, especially in prostate and breast cancer. So that is definitely involved in that. And then when you look at the other type of fat, that's the intra-abdominal fat. So this is the fat that is all around your intestines, your organs, your liver, your kidneys, your heart, all of those. So this type of fat produces what we call inflammatory cytokines. Now, these cytokines are very much involved in so many chronic diseases. Here's a list of all of the different kinds of diseases. All of these are related to inflammatory fat which is what we call the visceral fat or the belly fat. So all of that is there. Now, I have a device that I use for all my clients. I actually measure their percentage body fat, their percent skeletal muscle, but it also measures their visceral fat. So I measure their visceral fat because that's the sneaky fat. That's the fat you don't see. It's not so obvious. And it's around all your organs, but it contributes to so many chronic diseases, including cancers, including many different kinds of cancers, as you see here on this list. So all of this is implicated with this fat. When I looked at the graph on the distribution of the 10 states with the lowest life expectancy versus the 10 states with the highest life expectancy, it was rather interesting to see. So this is the distribution of the 10 states with the lowest life expectancy in the United States in red, the 10 states with the highest life expectancy in green. So what's fascinating here is that the states with the lowest life expectancy all happen to be right next to each other. Wow. Wow. Again, the southeast portion of the United States. If you forgot your geography, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. All right. Wow. So my question was this: what's the lifestyle going on there? What's the lifestyle? Why would this be the case? Because this defies statistics, right? This is not random chance. There is something going on. So is there a relationship? My question is there a relationship between lifestyle behaviors and this mortality risk in this geographical area of the United States? So one of the lifestyle factors that we look at is nutrition, very important lifestyle factor. And one of the things that's very adverse for nutrition is processed foods. Processed foods, we know that Americans have approximately 12% plant food, 25% animal food, and 63% processed foods. Wow. So one of the really devastating processed foods happens to be fast food. And there's a state here in this group of 10 that has a very popular export that is a fast food. It's Kentucky. Yes. What's the distribution of the consumption of Kentucky Fried Chicken? Wow. So KFC is visited in a period of 6 months. Again, you see this swath through the southeast portion of the United States. It's the highest concentration in the United States. Wow. Another lifestyle factor is physical activity. We know that physical activity helps us to stay healthy. Physical inactivity contributes to chronic disease. So the distribution from the data shows this. The highest concentration of physical inactivity, again, in the dark blue and the light blue in the southeast portion of the United States. What about stress? I was surprised when I saw this graph of frequent mental distress right from the CDC. And what it shows is that the biggest concentration geographically of frequent mental distress, again, southeast portion of the United States. 86% of physician visits happen to be related to stress. No kidding. So it's all through this part of the country and this area here, Fresno. If you've been there, you know why. All right. And then another area of concern as far as lifestyle is sleep, because when you don't get enough sleep, it absolutely affects our health. Sleep is critical for our health. Shorter sleep leads to shorter life. So I was surprised when I saw this graph because here it is. Prevalence of short sleep duration, less than 7 hours per night for adults aged 18 and over. Again, this wide area of distribution in the southeast portion of the United States, including especially Kentucky and Georgia. Wow, nobody's sleeping in those states. So these are some of the factors that contribute to cancer. They absolutely do. So our mission to be free of cancer, to either reverse cancer, to treat cancer, or prevent cancer, Our mission is to build resilience. Now, resilience in psychology is defined as the capacity to prepare for disruptions, to recover from shocks and stresses, and adapt and grow from a disruptive experience. So that's our mission, is to be really strong. This is my friend Nehemiah Delgado. So I think he personifies resilience because he's strong and he's fit. And he's an example of what it takes to actually have resilience in your life. So to build this resilience, we need to understand the context for our health. What frames our health? And it begins with this conversation that I had with Dr. Kalitsky in my undergraduate studies. And he said one day in a comparative anatomy and physiology class, remember that all of life is in one of two states at any given moment. Either it is surviving or it is thriving. And that's all there is. And when he said it like that, it rather surprised me. And I raised my hand. I said, Dr. Kalitsky, I'm not understanding this. And he said, you just sit with it, Ruben, you'll figure it out. I hated when he did that to me, but I sat with it for 3 years. And when I finally understood this, I was in my first year of medical school at UC Davis, and I was taking a class called embryology. So if you don't know, embryology is the study of the embryonic period of human development. So it's from the moment of conception to the point where everything is there. Now it gets bigger. After that, we call it a fetus. So it pretty much corresponds with the first trimester of a pregnancy. So most women who have been mothers remember their first trimester. They just do, because why? They've got an entire new human being growing inside of them, and hormones are going all over the place. It's amazing, and it's miraculous. So early on in our development, we all look like this, a ball of cells that you cannot tell the cells apart from each other. They all look alike. Now the ball of cells gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually it gets big enough, it starts to fold inward on itself and forms a tube of cells. This tube of cells will become the first organ system of the body to become distinguishable and operational. So this tube becomes known as the neural tube. A lot of people think it's the heart or the umbilical cord or the intestinal tract. No, it's the nervous system. So this becomes the central nervous system, which includes what we call the limbic brain, which is the central features of our brain that we have as adults, which includes the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, all of those central features, the amygdala, all of those. And it's all connected via the brainstem to the entire spinal cord. So this is the central nervous system. Now, this is critical to understand when it comes to being able to understand cancer. It really is so very important. Now, this is it's an electrical system, the professor said. And just like any electrical system, it's got a positive and a negative current. So in the human body, we end up with two currents. The positive current is referred to as the parasympathetic branch of the central nervous system. When it is on, it's going to affect every organ system in the body, every cell in the body in a particular way. Now, the negative current of the human body is what's referred to as the sympathetic branch of the central nervous system. When it is on, it is going to affect every organ system in the body and every cell in the body in the opposite way. So these two systems are polar opposite of each other. Now, what the professor said next got my attention, because he said, once this system is turned on, it's on for good for the rest of our life. It's the first system on, and it's the last system off. Okay, and it runs the show. And it's a good thing, because you don't have to think about beating your heart. It just works, right? Because this system is working. You don't have to think digesting your food. It just works because the system is working. So the thing about it, this system is always on, and it's doing its job, and it's always in one state or the other. So professor said, we are either operating in the parasympathetic state, or the sympathetic state at any given moment. We can go back and forth between the two, but we're only going to operate one or the other at any given moment. And that's when I got what Dr. Kalitsky was trying to teach me 3 years before, that all of life is in one of two states at any given moment. Either it is surviving in the sympathetic state, or it is thriving in the parasympathetic state. And that's all there is. My friends, this is critical to understand when it comes to understanding cancer. It is absolutely critical. Now, every healthcare professional learns about this and then promptly forgets after taking their board exams. But this is fundamental. This is absolutely fundamental. So when we're in the sympathetic state, our body is reacting to stress of any kind: physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual stress. Spiritual, I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking about the sense of purpose. So any stress in any of those areas is going to trigger us being in a sympathetic state, which is a state of survival. And we're going to operate at a very primal level. Now, we may recognize fight, flight, freeze, or fold as common reactions, but even a perceived threat, as subtle as a threat, is enough to put us in the state of the sympathetic. What we see in the literature is very clear, however, that the common thread of all chronic disease, including cancers, any kind of cancer, is being in the state of dis-ease far too much. Far too much. Far too much. So there are major factors that keep us in this state. And unfortunately, the medical community, their answer for being in the sympathetic state is just to throw medications or surgical procedures at this. So it doesn't work very well. So there are 5 major factors that keep us sick. So for instance, when it comes to cancer, the medical community, in fact, there are some states in the United States where it's still this way on the books. If you're a physician and you diagnose cancer, you have 3 options: chemotherapy, radiation, or surgery, or any combination thereof. And if you go outside of those 3 options, you could lose your license. So it's very limited in its effectiveness. And doctors are not trained to use nutrition as a modality to help people to improve their lifestyle, improve their health. Another factor that keeps us sick is our constant state of stress that we have in this country, because our brain is wired to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy when we're in the state of stress. People work 8, 10, 12, 14 hours. They get home, they're too tired to cook a healthy meal. So what do? They look in the refrigerator. There is the leftover pizza and the 6-pack of beer. Head to the couch with the pizza and the beer, turn on Netflix and veg out for a couple of hours. That's the American way. That keeps us sick. Another factor that keeps us sick is the pattern of lifestyle behaviors in our families. A lot of people mistakenly believe that genetics determines their risk of getting chronic disease. No, it's not that. Genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Another factor that keeps us sick is the food industry. How many of us really believe that McDonald's and Wendy's has your health as their best, as their number one priority? I don't think so. Another factor that keeps us sick is our government system. We don't prioritize health in the United States. We don't. The biggest lobbyist group in Washington, D.C., the pharmaceutical industry. Right behind it, the food industry. No, it's not big broccoli. It's not happening. So lifestyle medicine's answer to chronic disease, including cancer, is not to throw medications and surgical procedures. No, our answer is let's change the central nervous system state. Let's empower you to shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic more of the time. Now, I wish I could put everybody in complete parasympathetic state 100% of the time, and I would fly you out to an island off the coast of Fiji, and yeah, we would be just fine, but can't do that. So what we need to be able to do is empower you to shift and swing the pendulum from being predominantly in sympathetic to becoming predominantly in parasympathetic. Now what happens? The body can actually restore its health. It can actually start to thrive and heal. The body heals itself. It is designed to heal itself if we give it the right conditions. Cancer is not caused by a deficiency of chemotherapy. Cancer is not caused by a deficiency of radiation. Cancer is not caused by a deficiency of surgical procedures. No, cancer is caused by, oh, we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about what causes cancer. And what we have to be able to do to help the body heal is swing the pendulum into the parasympathetic state more of the time. The body will heal itself. When you were young, you got scratched up, you went crying to your mommy, and she put that darn mercurochrome on it. I remember that. Oh, it was nasty. And then put a Band-Aid on top of it and said, leave it alone for at least 3 days. And I did, and I wanted to look at it all the time, and finally took off the Band-Aid. Oh my God, it was miraculously healed. No, it's not a miracle. That's how our body is designed. It's amazing, and it's beautiful, and it works really well. We can heal from internal stresses like cancer the same way. And so we need to be able to understand how to do that. So how do we shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic more of the time? There's many different elements involved. So I'm going to give you some of them. One is going to be, I do a whole seminar on the 5 secrets to living a thriving, healthy, happy life. So we must always begin from within. So the first element that influences our central nervous system state is going to be the thoughts that we think. It starts here, my friends. We are what we think. All that we are arises from our thoughts. There's so many books about Think and Grow Rich, As a Man Thinketh. There's so many beautiful, powerful books about the power of our thoughts. If we've got stinking thinking, as Zig Ziglar taught me many years ago, then we're going to be in the sympathetic state, just like that. If we use the power of positive thinking, as Norman Vincent Peale taught me a long time ago, then we will be in the parasympathetic state. So we have to practice positive thinking. It's really important. The next area that influences our central nervous system are the words that we speak. If we are complaining and gossiping, being judgmental and assessing and doing all these negative things in our speech, that's going to put us in the sympathetic state quickly. Doesn't take long at all. If we are using uplifting, loving, supportive, encouraging words, that will keep us in the parasympathetic state. And it's not only the words that we speak, but it's also the words that we listen to. So that's why for over 35 years, I've never watched the news. Norman Cousins taught me that. The third major element that influences our nervous system state is going to be the actions that we take. If we make promises to others and even to ourselves, especially to ourselves, and we break those promises, that will put us in a state, the sympathetic state, just like that. Stephen Covey taught me the secret to living a powerful life is being able to make promises and keep them, especially to ourselves. That's living a life of integrity. That will keep us in the parasympathetic state. The fourth factor is the company we keep. It used to be said that we are the average of the 5 people we most associate with. In psychology, research backed that up, but the research lately has gone even further to show us that we are impacted not only by the people we immediately interact with, but also we're affected by their friends and the friends of their friends. There is an incredible book called Connected, incredible research that shows the impact of our relationships and their relationships and how that all affects us. People we may not even know. So it's really important that we vet the people in our lives very carefully. If we've got people in our circle that have stinking thinking, that's going to put us in the sympathetic. We all know You all know that person on your call. When that person's caller ID shows up on your phone and you think twice before you answer it, that person usually will put you in the sympathetic state. And we need to surround ourselves with positive, uplifting, encouraging, and loving people. The fifth element that influences our central nervous system state is the food that we eat. And this is surprising to most people, but everything affects our central nervous system state. Everything, including the food that we eat. Most of us don't think of food that way, but it absolutely does. We'll talk more about this later, but it's just incredible when we start to realize that food can either stimulate a sympathetic reaction in our body or a parasympathetic reaction. And when it comes to cancer, this is critical. So all of these are important, and all of these are consistent with the 7 lifestyle medicine areas that I teach. So hydration, nutrition, physical activity, harmful substance reduction, sleep, emotional well-being, and stress management, and healthy relationships. All of this, these are all the portions of the wheel of our health that all impact our ability to prevent, reverse, and treat chronic disease, including cancer. Because all of these are impacting our 4 fundamental energies as human beings. So from the wisdom of the ages, there are 4 fundamental energies: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. All of these energies impact our well-being. And when we have balance in these 4 areas, then what happens? The body gets to be in the parasympathetic state more of the time, and the body heals itself beautifully. It really does. So now we can move to the next part. The question is, what is the cause of cancer? So there's been a lot of research about how to treat cancer. There's a lot of research done about being able to do that and being able to basically try to stymie cancer from growing any further. And we've got all kinds of drugs and chemotherapy and radiation treatments and combined treatments and all kinds of things. But we need to understand the cause. So what causes cancer? Well, in order for cancer to occur, what has to happen is that at the cellular level, at a single cell level, so we have to get all the way down to the fundamental unit of the body. So we're going to look at a cell, which is the singular unit. We've got trillions of cells. Now, in the cell, there is a headquarters for that cell, and it's referred to as the nucleus. So the nucleus here of this cell has within it has all the DNA material, all the deoxyribonucleic acid material, which contains all our genetic information. That is going to be comprised of what we call chromosomes. So telomeres are going to be the segments of these chromosomes. The centromere is the middle of it. And so, and the far cap, the end of the chromosomes, there's 4 ends of that, and those are called the telomeres. And the whole segment is referred to as a chromatid, which is half of a chromosome. Now we've got lots of chromosomes. And if you take a chromosome and you start to unravel the chromatid, and you start to unravel it with all the DNA, so what you end up is this big complete what we call this double helix. So what we call this DNA double helix, and we got all this chromosomal material here. Now, if we unravel that, what we end up is with these nucleotide bases. So, and there's adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. And what happens is that they have to connect in a very specific way. All right, so adenine is, generally speaking, always going to connect with a thymine. And guanine is always going to connect with the cytosine. So we've got these 4 bases. And so, you know, in computers, we have 1s and 0s, but in the human body, we've got 4 bases: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. And that leads to an entire language of how our body is encoded to be able to do everything it needs to do. So this is the programming of our body, is the DNA, and it's really amazing, really amazing. So we have this backbone of sugar phosphate that goes all the way through, and that's what makes up the chromosomes. Now, every now and then the cell has to replicate, and it needs to be able to do so correctly, and the DNA needs to be replicated absolutely correctly. It has to be done correctly, otherwise things go crazy. So what happens in a cell when it's stressed? When it's stressed for a long period of time and there's too much stress, one of the things that can happen as a safety mechanism, it is a safety mechanism to keep the cell alive. If, let's say, it is suffocating. So one of the things that a cell can do, it can do something called replication and mutation. So normally when the DNA gets unraveled to be reproduced, for the cell to reproduce, to split into two identical cells, so we can get the original copy of the DNA done, and it gets copied and it does it correctly. So we end up with a correct copy, it matches up. But if the cell is under stress, the DNA can say, I'm struggling here. I can't breathe. I can't get enough nutrition here. I need to be able to change this cell. Let's see, I need a mutation that allows me to get sugar without needing insulin. That's a common mutation, by the way. So it's going to create a mutation and a change in the DNA for this new cell. This will be what we call a mutant cell. It will have a mutant copy of the DNA. So it's not, so there's many things that can initiate this DNA change. Many things, many things. Now, here's what happens. There are 3 phases in the development of cancer cells. So the first phase is referred to as initiation. So this is when one single cell undergoes a mutation that causes it to divide repeatedly, all right? So it gets that mutation, and now this cell is empowered to just replicate more and more and more, because the body's under the state of stress. So that's what it's going to do. So it's going to, you're going to get 1 mutation, then 2 mutations, and then you get 3 mutations, and it starts becoming this small little tumor. All right, now, the second stage is promotion. The promotion is when a tumor starts to develop and the cells within the tumor actually starts to mutate as well. So this is where you get this stage. So now you start getting more mutations. So it starts becoming much more progressive about this, and it starts to actually become larger, and you get many more mutations. But then there's the third stage, which is progression. And progression is when a cell mutates in such a way that it allows it to invade the surrounding tissue. So sometimes we refer to this as carcinoma in situ. It's just in one stage. So that's usually stage 1. Now it starts to become invasive. Now we call this stage 2. And then it starts to become malignant. It starts to invade the surrounding tissue. It can get into the different vessels, the lymphatic tissue, the lymphatic ducts, or the blood vessels, the veins and arteries. All right, so now we usually refer to this as stage 3 carcinoma. So it becomes malignant. And then we start to see metastatic tissue that starts to be found in distant sites. So now we start to refer to this usually as stage 4 cancer. So now we're seeing it lodge in other parts of the body. So maybe the original cancer was in the pancreas, and now we're having cancer showing up in the spine and the liver and other places in the body. So that could be metastatic or stage 4 cancer. So these are the phases of development, and I just explained the 4 stages that are usually used by the clinicians to talk about stage 1, stage 2, 3, or 4 cancer. Now, one of the most common scenarios here to understand how cells get into this situation, how we get into trouble, what causes initiation, what causes the initiation to occur. To understand that, we have to understand how a normal cell actually functions in producing energy. So here's one of the things that is normal about energy production inside a cell. So every cell, let's say a muscle cell here, has to produce energy. The energy molecule for the human body is this molecule here, ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. So adenosine triphosphate is the energy molecule in the human body. And we need it for everything that we do. Every muscle that we move, every thought that we think, every bit of food that we digest, we're using ATP. That is our energy currency. Now, producing the maximum amount of ATP occurs through these little organelles that are inside the cells called mitochondria. Now, we can have a few or we can have a lot. We can vary them anywhere in between as far as the number of mitochondria in our cells. In order for these mitochondria to produce this energy molecule, ATP, at a maximum level, optimal level, we need a little bit of healthy fats from free fatty acids that come from plant foods. Okay, we need that kind of fat. Very, very important, especially omega-3 fatty acids. Now, we have to have, for the substrate for this ATP, we need a molecule called pyruvate, which is half of a glucose molecule. This pyruvate can only come, however, not from free sugar. No, it doesn't come from that. It comes from either free glycogen or stored glycogen inside the cell. Now, glycogen is the human complex carbohydrate that we must have. A lot of people have thought mistakenly that all carbs are bad. Carbs are bad. Carbs are bad. I'm sure you've heard that before. But they don't distinguish carbohydrates. There are many kinds of carbohydrates. Yes, refined sugar is not a healthy carbohydrate. Yes, donuts are carbs, and they are not a healthy carbohydrate. Cookies are filled with refined carbohydrates. There's a difference between refined carbohydrates and unrefined carbohydrates that human beings are meant for. There are two specific carbohydrates that are complex, unrefined carbohydrates that human beings must have in order to produce this ATP. You probably never heard of them, but amylose and amylopectin are the two specific carbohydrates. They are specific unrefined carbohydrates that we must have. And we must get them in the diet. We can't manufacture them. We have to manufacture the glycogen. And the only way we're going to manufacture this glycogen is from amylose and amylopectin. Amylose and amylopectin, there's an enzyme that are used to break those down called amylase. It's in our saliva. Human beings have 6 times more amylase than any other primate. We are designed to break down amylose and amylopectin, which are otherwise known as starch. I'm going to come back to this later. Now, you don't see protein anywhere in here. All right, so it's carbohydrates, fats to produce energy. Now, here's the problem. Here's the problem. And we've seen this with diabetes. Now, when I was in medical school, I was taught that diabetes is caused by insulin resistance. So in order for glucose or sugar or carbohydrates to get into the cell, we need to be able to have insulin as basically a cofactor that binds to the insulin receptor site to allow a signal to get generated over to the glucose channels and allow the carbohydrate to come into the cell to then travel to the mitochondria and get metabolized. So we looked at a group of diabetics with this new technology back in 2004. It's a high resolution MRI looking inside the cell. And so when we looked inside the cells of these diabetics, what we saw was shocking, absolutely shocking. It was such a surprise because we looked inside these cells and we saw all of this, these pockets of what's called intramyocellular lipid. Inside, myo, muscle, cells, lipid is fat. Fat. Well, why is this so shocking? Is because muscle cells are normally about 90% water. Lipid is oil. So do oil and water mix? No, they don't. You can do this at home. You can take a glass and pour water and oil. Where does the oil go? Well, it goes to the top. It goes to the top. It forms a slick. Well, this is critical to understand when it comes to cancer. It forms a slick. Now, what happens out in the ocean? When you get an oil slick from a tanker or from anything that leaks, pipeline leaks, you get this oil slick on the surface of the water, but what happens to the marine life? It goes belly up and it dies because of suffocation. It cannot breathe. So inside of our cells, we have a miniature ocean. It's a miniature ocean. It's 90% water. And so when we get oil, we get fat, too much fat inside the cell, it forms an oil slick and starts the process of suffocation on the inside. We never saw this before 2004. We started to realize that we are causing the cells to suffocate from the inside with this excess fat in the diet. And one of the mechanisms that can happen is that when this cell ends up with too much fat, it will trigger the emergency mechanism of replication and mutation. It can trigger that. So one of the most common mechanisms for stimulating cancer, and it makes sense because 70% of the American population is overweight or obese, that one of the most common mechanisms for stimulating cancer is going to be excess fat. Excess fat. It's the biggest culprit. And it adds up. The data adds up. The United States, when it comes to fat consumption, we're number one. Go USA. All right. So we lead the world in fat consumption. We're up there. And when we see the data on the standard American diet for the last 50 years, I'm waiting for the 2020 data to come out. But in 1970, we had 338 calories per person per day from added fats and oils, which is still quite a bit. But by 2010, that rose to 562 calories in added fats and oils. That's alarming. So it's been a lot. In fact, the greatest proportion of increase of this increase, about 48% of the caloric growth in our diets in the United States have been due to added fats. Another 34% from flours, cereal products, or refined foods. So we've been seeing that. Fat, if we look at that, we can see especially vegetable oils. Here's the graph from 1909. And so what we see is that butter, lard, and margarine have all decreased. But look at the increase in vegetable oils, especially in this last 25, 30 years. It's been alarming. It's been a huge increase in vegetable oil. Not all fats are the same, just so you know. All right, there's many different kinds of fats. Now, I don't want to teach you biochemistry today, but I'm going to show you a little bit. So these are the molecular structure diagrams for 4 different types of fats. So C represents the carbon atom, H represents the hydrogen atom, and then O represents the oxygen atoms. Now, the fat molecule on the bottom is the healthiest fat. So this is a fat molecule that has carbons that are attached to another carbon with a double bond. This is a high energy bond. Carbon can normally attach to 4 different atoms at the same time. But in this such situation, it's attaching to another carbon with a double bond, which is a high energy bond, and humans have enzymes that allow us to break open this fat molecule right at those high energy bond linkages. We have wonderful enzymes that allow us to do this. And this is a wonderful thing because we can start to produce short chain fatty acids, which we need. we need to help us to produce energy. So this particular molecule, this particular fat, alpha linolenic acid, which, and the first carbon-carbon double bond is on the third carbon from the methyl group over here. So therefore it's referred to as an omega-3 fatty acid. And it's got 3 carbon-carbon double bonds. Great molecule for human health. Absolutely great. So we want this. Most of us don't get enough. We don't get enough omega-3 fatty acids. The next fat is right above it, and that's an omega-6. So the first carbon-carbon double bond on the 6th carbon, and it's only got 2. Now, this is a pro-inflammatory omega-6. We need some, but we don't need too much. Most of us have too much, especially from meat, dairy, eggs. They're loaded with omega-6. And some plants have a lot of omega-6 as well. So we want to make sure that we get enough omega-3s. Now, the next fat above that is a monounsaturated fat. So it's only got 1 carbon-carbon double bond. So we can't make those short-chain fatty acids with this. So it's not very healthy for us, and it absolutely contributes to inflammation. And then the top fat up here, this is the real significant culprit, and that is saturated fat. There are no carbon-carbon double bonds here at all. In fact, this particular molecule, this saturated fat, palmitic acid, which comes from palm oil, has the same chemical properties as these fat derivatives. In case you didn't know, all of these molecules, all of these, plastic, motor oil, diesel fuel, and gasoline, are derived from fat. Yes, crude oil comes from dinosaur fat, dead fat, dead molecules. So saturated fat in the human body is dead. And the only thing we can do with it is roll it up and produce more cholesterol, which we don't need. Now, we can only metabolize a certain amount of fat, and it needs to be healthy fat. The average American, which has a lot of saturated fat in their diet, is averaging 161 grams of fat per person per day. That's crazy. It's crazy. If you were to purify that as just olive oil, that would be about 3/4 of a cup of olive oil a day on average by the average American. That's horrid. Now, a collegiate athlete like my youngest son, all right, he's burning 60 to 80 grams of fat a day, but healthy fats, all right? So it's going to be avocados, nuts, and seeds, all right? He can burn that, but he needs that for metabolism because he's working out 2, 3, 4 hours a day. A fit, active adult is going to burn somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 to 60 grams of fat a day. An unfit, low active person is probably 20 to 40 grams of fat a day. An overweight or obese person or somebody with a chronic disease is probably going to be burning somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20 grams of fat a day or less. So one of the things that's real important for us to look at, and I have a lot of my clients examine how much fat are they taking in on a daily basis. It's a very important metric. It's very important to measure that. Most people, I don't have people measure their calories. I don't have people measure their protein or their carbs or their or anything else. I just have them measure their fat, the fat grams. It really helps us. So there are many sources of fat, and it's sneaky. It shows up in many different places. Now, if you're a healthy, fit athlete, you need the right amount of fat and the right kinds of fats. But if you're overweight or you have chronic disease like cancer, then you want to definitely be able to reduce your fat intake. It's really important. So number 1 on the list, as far as the most egregious forms of fat, is going to be all oils. It doesn't matter what kind. These are all processed foods. They are not natural, all right? They are not. A lot of people say, well, the extra virgin olive oil. I don't care how virgin the extra virgin olive oil is, okay? So it's all processed, man-made fat, all right? And they're all 100% fat, every single one of them. There are no trees on the face of the planet that have bottles of olive oil hanging from their branches. Doesn't happen. So they're 100% fat, and most of them have a high percentage of saturated fat or monounsaturated fat. So the thing is, a lot of them have a lot of the fats that we don't need. And it's even worse for the foods that are fried in oil, all right? Especially like these are hush puppies, and then you got the fish and chips. I mean, that's all fried in oil. So we're just basically soaking food in a fat jacuzzi. Oils are not healthy, all right? There's a lot of mistaken beliefs, misconceptions about oils. And they say, oh, olive oil is healthy. There's studies that show that it's good for my heart health. There's all kinds of studies that show all kinds of things. You have to look who's paying for the research. Now, here's what the data shows clearly, that what oils affect artery function, vasodilation, increases triglycerides, decreases oxygen transfer, sympathetic response immediately with your body, increases inflammation, increases cholesterol. And guess what? It's going to put your cells in a sympathetic state, which will therefore induce cancer. So that's one of the things it can do as well. So Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who's a heart disease guru, he says the same diet will affect cancer. He says, no oil, no oil. So if you've got oil at home, one of the things that I'm going to invite you to do is to get rid of it. Just get rid of it. You got two options. Just throw it away, or you can donate it to a massage therapist. Perfectly fine. All right. So you want to do that. Another major source of fat is going to be all meats. It doesn't matter what kind. Okay. Including fish. Yes. Some people say, oh, well, I got to have my fish, or I got to have my chicken. I said, no. It doesn't matter. Beef, pork, poultry, fish, eggs, all of it are very high in fat, especially the processed meats. Your salami, your pepperoni, your hot dogs, your sausages, all of those very, very high in fat. So you want to watch that. And some people say, well, I got to get my protein. And I tell people, yes, you can get your protein from meat. Absolutely. No question. You can get protein from meat, but there's a trade-off. Dr. Michael Clapper, I love what he talks about. He goes around medical schools and he teaches medical students today about nutrition. It's the class, he says, what I should have been taught about nutrition when I was in medical school 50 years ago. It says, here's the trade-off. Oxidized cholesterol, which we now know contributes to Alzheimer's. Reactive aldehydes, definitely mutagenic and absolutely contribute to cancer. New 5-GC, pro-inflammatory, absolutely contributes to cancer. Endotoxins, which are heat stable and absolutely contribute to cancer. Trimethylamine oxide, which absolutely contributes to heart disease and inflammation. Carcinogenic heterocyclic amines absolutely contribute to cancer. Heme iron, that absolutely contribute to strokes and cancers. And bioconcentrated pesticides, herbicides, heavy metals, hormones, and antibiotics, guess what? All contributing to cancer. That's a trade-off. And when you look at eggs, well, eggs they're no better. I mean, consuming eggs increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, but colon cancer, 500%, diabetes, and prostate cancer, 81%, breast cancer as well. So it goes on. There's all different kinds of cancers. So there's definitely a trade-off when you have meat, dairy, and eggs. Dairy, by the way, is not much better at all right? It really isn't. Dairy, you don't need. All dairy comes from a cow. You don't need it, including milk, butter, cheese, yogurt, cottage cheese, and ice cream. If it comes from a cow, you don't need it at all. I love what Dr. Milton Mills says. Drinking milk for nutrients is like inhaling cigarette smoke for oxygen. Let's get straight about it. So you don't need it. There is no species of mammal on the face of the planet that routinely nurses a different species of mammal by choice. Think about it. All right. And that's been happening for thousands of years. So you don't need milk. You don't need any dairy whatsoever. That's another myth. Another thing that's going to contribute to cancer is going to be refined sugar, because refined sugar feeds many types of cancers. It does, because one of the common mutations that occurs is the elimination of the insulin receptor site. And now the glucose channels just open up and bring the sugar right in to feed the cancer. So yes, it's true that sugar feeds many types of cancers. When you look, you see that the United States, again, here we go again, We lead the world in sugar consumption. So we have so much sugar consumption and purchase, and it's been just alarming how much sugar we take in here in the United States. It used to be that most people would have about 1 lump of sugar per week. That's not a whole lot, all right? 1 lump of sugar per week, but now it's 20 lumps of sugar, about 700 grams per person per week. That's enormous increase. There are places that sell this, and to me, this is just like crack cocaine. So there are crack houses, and they sell one product, sugar. That's all they share. They sell. They sell you nothing but sugar, and that's what it is. It's just like crack cocaine. In fact, sugar is as addictive as cocaine. It is, absolutely. The font here is intentional because that's what Coca-Cola replaced the cocaine with. In the late 1800s, they replaced the cocaine with refined sugar because they knew it was as addictive. In fact, we have the brain scans now showing that sugar fires up the reward centers in the brain and the hippocampus stronger than cocaine. By the way, I'm not suggesting that you switch to cocaine, okay? Please don't do that. That could even kill you, all right? So don't do that. Get rid of the sugar. It is a toxic and addictive substance. It absolutely is going to feed cancer cell growth. It's going to promote inflammation, suppress the human growth hormone, so you're not going to grow healthy cells that you need, and it absolutely advances aging. So we want to get the refined sugar out of the diet. In addition, we need to get rid of processed foods. This is really a problem. 63% of the American diet is from processed foods. If it comes in a can or a box, unless it's just beans, okay? So don't go with all those canned products that have lots of salt and everything else. So you want to be eliminating processed foods and reducing that significantly. Other things for us to be aware of in terms of promoting cancer. Another thing that's really important, harmful substances. Number 1 on the list is alcohol. There's no safe level of alcohol. All right. Some people I've met people who were struggling with cancer and they were still drinking alcohol. I said, what are you thinking? All right. You can't do that. You can't. The truth about alcohol, it absolutely contributes to heart disease, the number 1 killer in many different ways in terms of causing arrhythmias and all kinds of blood pressure issues and increases in the risk for stroke, but it also increases the risk for cancer. And I thought I'd share this with you directly from the American Medical Association. This was written August 13th, 2020, and submitted to the Dietary Guidelines Committee for Americans. This is the actual wording. This is the paragraph from that letter from the American Medical Association to the Dietary Guidelines Committee, and I want you to read this line right here. There is no safe threshold for alcohol and cancer risk. No safe threshold for alcohol and cancer risk. The consumption of up to 1.5 drinks per day accounts for an estimated 26 to 35% of all alcohol attributable U.S. cancer deaths. Wow. The equivalence has been done in the research. We show that 1 bottle of wine is equivalent to the cancer risk of 5 cigarettes per week in men, 5 cigarettes per men, and 10 cigarettes for women. So it's rather significant, worse for women. In the United Kingdom, they have a lot more public health information about this than we have here in the United States, clearly. So they show this. In fact, this is part of their advertising that they do in the United Kingdom. Alcohol can cause 7 types of cancer. Drinking less alcohol could prevent 12,800 cancer cases per year. Mouth and upper throat cancer, larynx, esophagus, breast, liver, bowel. All right. 4 ways it causes cancer: it damages the cell, increases damage from tobacco, affects your hormones, linked to breast cancer, breaks down into cancer-causing chemicals. So they're advertising this, they're doing this, they're promoting this information. In addition, if you like your brain and you like your brain being able to function properly, you should also know that alcohol, even a small amount, can adversely affect the brain. Now, we've known that heavy alcohol consumption is associated with brain shrinkage, but based on a comprehensive recent study published March 4th of this year, 2022, even one drink a day can damage the brain. And this is based on over 36,000 brain scans. That's definitive proof. And the damage from just even one drink a day is exponential with each additional drink. So that's not good news for the brain. So we want to be aware of that. Another thing that can affect the brain and absolutely be contributing to cancer is going to be caffeine, because that's the kissing cousin of nicotine. It is. It's absolutely the kissing cousin of nicotine. So we know that consumption of energy drinks leads to an increased risk of stroke by 500%. Wow. Well, what's a small amount doing? Well, the truth about caffeine is that it's rather significant. It's going to dehydrate your body and acidify your body. Will that lead to a sympathetic response? Absolutely. Will that strain your adrenal glands and pump toxic blends of adrenaline, hurting your brain, liver, and kidneys? Absolutely. All right. Blood sugar imbalances, headaches, anxiousness, weight gain, premature aging, adrenal fatigue, hair loss, depersonalization, kidney stones. But one thing you got to get, this is putting the cells at the state of stress. So if you have cancer or want to prevent cancer, you want to consider eliminating your caffeine as well. Yes, I know there are lots of studies of people saying that it's good for you because there's benefits of your alertness from caffeine. Oh, I know all about that. I was addicted to caffeine, by the way. I just want you to know. I know firsthand, I can't touch this stuff anymore. Because if I do, my vision, what will happen is I'll get the blood vessels in my eyes will rupture and I'll get floaters in my visual field. It's not good. That's an indicator like, don't do this. Don't do this. So there's a lot more negative than there is positive. And you just don't know about the negative. You don't hear about it. And absolutely at the top of the list is going to be cigarette smoking. So if you do smoke, you got to quit. And if you know people that want to quit, I'm going to suggest that you give them some help in a second. But it causes definitely cancer risk, toxic chemicals, all kinds of toxicity to the blood vessels, everything. So this is all information from the American Cancer Society Association and the American Heart Association. If you know anybody that smokes, or if you yourself smoke, I recommend this book. This is outstanding. It is an excellent book. Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking. Everybody who has read this book has quit. Every single person that I know of, all my clients have read this book. They've quit smoking. Ellen DeGeneres read this book and she stopped. And it's really been great. So when we look, the real cause of cancer is going to be persistent sympathetic responses going on in your body, being in the sympathetic state far too much from a variety of different reasons: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. That's going to lead to an acidification of the bloodstream, suppression of the immune system, and it's going to be caused by a variety of factors: stress, anger, resentment, blame, shame, guilt, inflammation, lifestyle, rigid attachments, sympathetic foods. Let's talk about inflammation, because that is so common. Most people are hearing about inflammation, but there are many causes of inflammation. Lots of things can contribute to inflammation: stress, dehydration, being sedentary, lack of sleep, meat, dairy, eggs, processed meats, absolutely, fried foods, oils, sodas, alcohol, tobacco, caffeine, fast foods, and refined sugars all can cause and contribute to promoting cancer. They can all do that. So now that you are thoroughly depressed by all the bad news, what works? Now the good news. I got good news for you. I really do. All right. So what works? So to understand that, let's go back to the cell again. So the basic unit of the body is the cell. It's an energy system, just like a car is. So the engine is going to be the equivalent of the mitochondria. However, protein is not used for fuel. I want to get this very clear. Protein is not for fuel. It is basically to help manufacture all the different structures of the cell membrane, the cell organelles, everything. It's going to basically make up the body of the car, if you will. So the tires, the nuts, the screws, the bolts, everything. So it's for the infrastructure. What we need for fuel, however, is two different things. So we need a little bit of free fatty acids or triglycerides, a little bit, small amount, and we need to get this glycogen. All right. So this glycogen we have to manufacture. It's the human carbohydrate. So going back to this figure again, just briefly. So remember, we need to be able to manufacture glycogen, and it comes from these two specific carbohydrates, amylose and amylopectin. So amylose and amylopectin, here's the molecular structure diagrams for amylose and amylopectin. Every circle represents a glucose molecule, but they're bounded together in a very specific way. Amylase is the enzyme that allows us to break these two molecules down, and then we repackage them inside the cell as glycogen. So we need these two. Now, you probably have not gone to the supermarket and seen any marketing that says high in amylose and amylopectin. No, you buy it. However, research studies shows you are 88 times more likely, you're 80% more likely, 80% more likely to buy a product if it says high in protein, packed with protein. But that's not what we need. We need amylose and amylopectin, otherwise known as starch. Yes, starch. This is the cover of the scientific journal, Starch. Yeah. So scientists are studying starch and how to use it in many amazing ways. But what starch looks like for you and for me when it comes to food is going to be this: legumes, beans, peas, lentils. There's over 2,000 varieties of these. Knock yourself out. Chickpeas, red beans, white beans, black beans, black-eyed peas. I mean, there's 2,000 varieties. Go crazy, go nuts, have fun. And then there's whole grains. Whole grains are loaded with starch, okay? Corn, millet, spelt, quinoa, amaranth, steel-cut oats, brown rice, the list goes on. There are dozens. I had farro with my bean burrito the other day. It was delicious, it was amazing. I love farro. All right, and then starchy vegetables are loaded with starch. One of my favorite foods, maybe it's yours too, but I love potatoes. I mean, potatoes are fabulous and they're really great and they're loaded with nutrients, really great. And they're loaded with starch, including sweet potatoes, and then squashes also are great. There's all kinds of squashes. So there's over 4,000 varieties of potatoes. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of squashes. So go crazy. It's great. All plants have starch. All vegetables have starch, including all of these. These are vegetables. Yes, they all have starch. In case you forgot what it looked like, I thought I'd show you this picture. This is the part of the supermarket you want to go to. So have lots of vegetables. Again, lots and lots and lots of varieties. You can't possibly get bored. So there's lots to choose from. And then also fresh fruit, not processed fruit, not fruit juice. We want fresh fruit. It's okay to cut it, not a problem, but just you want fresh fruit. It really works well. The fiber in it makes it so much better because it's an unrefined sugar, and our body metabolizes that so much more effectively. Now, if you have too much fat in your diet, you want to be mindful of the next category, which is nuts, seeds, and avocados. These are healthy fats. They are loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, especially chia seeds and flax seeds. But you want to make sure that you're not getting too much fat, because if you got an oil slick inside your cell, you want to reduce that oil slick first and foremost. Avocados are about 30 grams of fat. One avocado, 30 grams of fat. A handful of walnuts, almonds, pecans are going to be anywhere from about 14 to 22 grams of fat. So that could really load up your fat content for the day. So you want to be aware of that. When you're healthy and fit, you can have these, not a problem. Now, instead of refined sugar, a lot of people have a sweet tooth. I recommend, Dr. Michael Greger talks about a very healthy alternative, and that's going to be date sugar or date syrup. So you can get date syrup, and it's just made from date sugar. So there's a company called Just Date Syrup, and you can go there and order it, but you can start to find it now. Even Trader Joe's is now carrying date syrup. All right. You can go to grocery outlet and they have date syrup sometimes, and it's great. So really great. So this approach, this dietary approach, whole food, plant-based, oil-free diet has got so many benefits. There's so many benefits from this. There's scientific research on every single one of these, but it absolutely helps us in decreasing inflammation, activating their immune system, which helps us to get rid of those cancer cells. And there's so many more benefits. In fact, I had to put it on 2 slides, but it absolutely helps us in so many different ways. And it allows us to help the body heal itself. So in quick summary, what's really important to recognize is that the food that you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. Now you're an adult and you get to choose, but it's really this black and white. It really is. It's this dramatic of a difference. So it's one or the other, because every time you eat or drink, you're either feeding disease or you're fighting it. And you get to choose. You get to choose. So neurologically, we can look at food a different way. This is my food pyramid looking at the neurological implications of food. So life depleting or sympathetic food are going to be meat, dairy, eggs, oils, processed foods, refined sugar, deep fried foods, sodas, legal drugs, and excitotoxins like MSG and aspartame. Legal drugs include alcohol, nicotine, and caffeine. So we want to stay up here: starchy veggies, whole grains, legumes, greens, colorful veggies, and fruit. This is a great way to go. Now, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine is not the only scientific organization that supports a whole food plant-based diet. In case you didn't know, this was, by the way, this should be on CNN every night as far as I'm concerned, but the American Medical Association, World Cancer Research Fund, American Diabetes Association, Endocrine Society, American Heart Association, American Cancer Society, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, American Association of Clinical Endocrinology, they all agree. They all agree, eat more unrefined plant foods. They're all saying that. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to have your refrigerator look like a garden teeming with life rather than a morgue rotting of death. All right, so that's your mission, because as Hippocrates said well over 2,000 years ago, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So some of the pieces of research that I want to share with you, one of the best pieces of research is from Dr. T. Colin Campbell, my friend, Dr. Campbell, who wrote the China study. Just wonderful. I love this book. This is the updated version, I think it is. So anyway, it's fantastic. So one of the things that was interesting for him, because he grew up on a dairy farm, he grew up milking cows, he grew up eating meat, dairy, and eggs. He grew up with that, and he was doing research on nutritional biochemistry on the need for protein. And he came across this research that shocked him. So they had done this research first in India, and then they did it again later, 10 years later, and they took a group of rats. And what they did is they split them up into 2 groups. One group, what they did is by the way, all the rats, they introduced a aflatoxin, AFB, which was, the intention of that was to induce liver cancer in rats. So they did that with all the rats, all 42 rats, but with 30 of them, what they did is they gave them 20% protein in their diet from a dairy protein called casein, so which is the most prevalent protein in cow's milk. Then the other group of rats, what happened is they gave them only 5% protein from casein for this whole time frame. And what happens, I think it was 12 weeks. So what happened was the group that had 20% protein, 100% of them developed tumors with nodules. The other group, 0% developed tumors, developed cancer. Wow. Well, that was interesting. So Dr. T. Colin Campbell saw this research and he said, okay, I want to try to replicate it and see if we can stage it. So he did this. So he took 2 groups of rats. So he split them up into 2 different groups, and he gave them the dairy protein. He gave them the aflatoxin first. Okay, so all of them got the aflatoxin, and then they all the two groups got two different levels of dairy protein. One got the 20% protein, and at 3 weeks, they started to show clusters of tumors, of cancer. The other group of rats, they gave them the aflatoxin and only 5% protein from the casein, and they never developed any cancers at all. Wow. Wow. So he was able to replicate this research and stage it at 3, 6, 9, and 12 weeks. Then he said, I wonder, what if we went back and forth between these two levels? What would happen? That's a very interesting scenario. So what would happen if we went back and forth? So he did that. And so he took one group of rats, introduced the aflatoxin and 20% protein. And then at 3 weeks, they increased their level of tumors as expected. Then for the next 3 weeks, he reduced their protein from 20% to 5%. Now what happened? They regressed. Tumors regressed. Wow. So we had regression. We had cancer regression, tumor regression. Then for the next 3 weeks, from week 6 to week 9, he increased their protein from the casein from 5% to 20%. And guess what? Cancer progression. Wow. And it was back up to where it was before. And then some. And then for the next 3 weeks, he cut it down to 5%, and we saw cancer regression again. So what he was able to show clearly is that we can turn on and turn off the cancer growth just by changing the protein in the diet, the animal protein in the diet. Wow. So when he concluded his research after years of doing this, he was able to show this, that when normal cells are introduced to a high amount of a carcinogen, you will get more initiation of the DNA being changed. But on a low protein diet, there is going to be less foci or less tumors. But even if we have the tumors, when we have normal cells and we have a less initiation, very, very small dose of the aflatoxin, less initiation. But if they are on a high protein diet, we end up with more foci and more tumors. Wow. Wow. That was profound. Then taking it to a large scale, when we look at countries and humans, what we're able to see is this, that in countries where women are growing up with a predominantly plant-based diet, they don't start menstruating until usually about age 15. The hormones then change and they start being able to ovulate, and hormones go up to level 35. And that continues until about age 45, at which point they start what's called menopause. And that usually completes by age 50 and levels off back to the low level there it was before. In countries where there is an animal-based diet, like the United States, what we've been seeing is that the baseline of the female hormone exposure is higher to begin with, even in children. But that menarche is starting at a much younger age, about 5 years earlier, about age 10. Now, I've talked to some grade school teachers, and they've been seeing it in second and third and fourth grades quite a bit. So we're seeing menarche, and we're seeing the development of ovulation, and the hormone exposure goes up to level 50. So it's much higher. That persists until about age 50 before climbing down and being done with menopause by age 55 on average. Wow, that's significant. And what this increased area underneath the solid black line between these two lines is now referred to as the estrogen load. And the estrogen load is correlated with the risk of breast cancer. So what Dr. T. Colin Campbell was able to show in his research is that casein is the most relevant cancer promoter ever discovered. Animal protein turns on cancer. It absolutely does. And we have research studies showing that plant proteins do not turn on cancer. In fact, they help to turn it off. So it's a huge difference. Not only that, now the World Health Organization in 2015 did research showing that all processed meats, including sausages, hot dogs, bacon, salami, ham, pepperoni, bologna, all the deli meats, all of those, all processed meats are now classified as a class 1 carcinogen. They cause cancer. They should have a label on these foods in the supermarkets, but they do not. They need to. So all of those cause cancer, and all the other meats, all the other red meats probably cause cancer. They're listed as 2A. They're close second to causing cancer as the processed meats. Doesn't sound like a good proposition. The food industry's response to this, of course, is baloney. All right, they don't want to believe it, and they won't put it on their advertising at all. They resist it completely. But the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, we say that there is no amount that's safe, and the risk is absolutely real. Nearly 50,000 people die from colorectal cancer each year, and processed meats is a big contributing factor. It really is. So the evidence on processed meat and cancer is clear cut. The data show that no level of intake can confidently be associated with a lack of risk. So we've got to be very, very straight about that. And we also see that just 9 grams of processed meat per day can increase women's risk of breast cancer by 20%. That's significant. And there's a citation there for you. From nutritionfacts.org with Dr. Michael Greger, the carcinogens found in cooked meat are thought to explain why women who eat more grilled, barbecued, or smoked meats over their lifetimes may have as much as 47% higher odds of breast cancer. We also show in the research that vegetarian diets and the incidence of cancer in a low-risk population, which the Seventh-day Adventists, which they're already fairly healthy, because most of them are very limited in terms of their meat, dairy, and egg consumption and processed foods. So vegan women, for example, had a 34% lower rates of female-specific cancers such as breast, cervical, and ovarian cancer. That's significant. That's significant. That's a huge difference. Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, Nobel Prize winner for her work on telomeres, actually did research with Dr. Dean Ornish, and she was able to show that a vegan plant-based diet caused more than 500 genes to change in 3 months' time, 90 days, okay? 90 days, turning on the genes that prevent disease and turning off the genes that cause cancer, heart disease, and other illnesses. Very exciting work. Dr. Dean Ornish did more work on prostate cancer along with Dr. Blackburn. And what he was able to show that a plant-based diet and lifestyle intervention being with people with prostate cancer decreased the PSA by 4% and increased 6%, yet the control group increased their PSA by 6%. It decreased the growth of prostate cancer cells by 70% versus 9% in the control, decreased gene expression contributing to the cancer, which did not happen in the other group, and increased gene expression preventing cancer. Very exciting, very exciting. By the way, I helped Bob to reduce his risk of prostate cancer because this is what we followed for his prostate cancer before he came to me with the diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. So it was very exciting to be able to do this, and I shared this with him. Red meat increases the risk of colon cancer, which is the 3rd leading cause of death for both men and for women. And so they did this research, and they compared cancer incidence rates for dietary patterns centered on red meat, fish, poultry, or no meat. And those who consumed red meat were more likely to develop distal colon cancer than those who consumed no red meat. So really significant, big difference. Colon cancer is nothing to play games with, all right? So I thought I'd show you a picture. This is what I saw when I did autopsies much of the time. I saw, this is the split open and washed out colon of a person who has died, or maybe this is from a person that had it resected from a surgical specimen. So one of the things that I got to see, so normally we see these folds, these are not even very healthy folds. A lot of the folds here you see are flattened out, very, very flattened out. These are a little bit better, but still not very healthy as far as the folds. But what we see are polyps. Here's a polyp, there's a polyp, there's a polyp. But here we see some invasive cancer. This is a cancer inside that area of that wall. So this is a cancer, and it's actually going all the way through to the outside. This would feel like a marble. It's so hard. It's like a marble inside a sock. It would feel that way. It's such a hard nodule of tissue of cancer in that area. So that's what it looks like. So we did some interesting research, and we wanted to look at this because what we see is that African Americans have a high amount of colon cancer. So we did some research, and we also saw that Africans in South Africa have a much lower level of colon cancer. In fact, in the United States, African Americans have 65 cancer cases per 100,000, and Africans in South Africa have only 5 per 100,000. So that's a huge difference, huge difference. So that's a 13-fold difference. So what we wanted to do is look at their diets. And what we saw is that the African Americans have an animal-based diet versus the South African, which is predominantly plant-based, not completely, but it's predominantly. So what we did is we looked at being able to follow their diets, and then we swapped their diets for 2 weeks and then see what happens with doing biopsies before and after. Before and after. So here's what happened. So we took, this is the colonic epithelial proliferation rates among the 3 groups. Okay, so we have African American, Caucasian. So baseline level. So what we have is the African group has very little proliferation rates, which is an indication for precancer, whereas African American and Caucasian much higher. Okay, and this is the sigmoid colon. This is which is the beginning part. The ascending is going up and then over, and the transverse is going over. Okay, and the sigmoid, excuse me, is at the end. Sigmoid at the end. All right, so that's how it goes. So now what we did is we did an experiment. We just did Africans versus African Americans. So there's no genetic drift there. So we did this. So the diet for Africans, what we did is we gave them the African American diet. Okay, so day 1 for their breakfast was beef sausage and links, pancakes, a hamburger for lunch with French fries, and meatloaf and rice for dinner. Typical American diet. All right, so we did that for 2 weeks. And then the African Americans, what we gave them was the South African diet. Now it's not 100% plant-based, but they gave corn fritters, salmon croquettes, spinach, red pepper, and onions for breakfast. All right. Then for lunch, they had corn dogs and a veggie dog. Okay, processed food, but they still had, it was plant, homemade tater tots and mango slices. For dinner, they had a high corn meal and tomatoes and okra. They had corn muffins with black-eyed peas with corn, and a pineapple and some pineapple and black tea. So this is what they had for 2 weeks. Now, here's what we showed in terms of the differences. So in terms of proliferation, that means more mutations in cellular growth. All right, the African Americans beforehand, their proliferation was high at 35, and after 2 weeks, it decreased, statistically significant. All right, so the proliferation before, we have a lot of the darker areas are the areas of cellular proliferation. And then afterwards, that decreased significantly. With the South Africans, the proliferation was fairly low, not very much there. But then after 2 weeks on the American diet, significantly increased, as we see here in the graphic as well. So that's rather interesting. In just 2 weeks' time. Inflammation, same thing. So inflammation is a big factor when it comes to cancer. So for the Americans, all right, beforehand, lots of inflammation in their colon. After 2 weeks on the South African predominantly plant-based diet, much less inflammation. The South Africans, Before, very little inflammation, but after 2 weeks on the American diet, a tremendous amount of inflammation, increased significant again. So both changes are statistically significant. And some people wonder about soy and breast cancer risk. Some people ask me about that all the time. So here's the data on this. So this is from the International Journal of Epidemiology out of Loma Linda Sciences. So what we show is that dairy, soy, and the risk of breast cancer. So 3 cups of dairy, 80% increase risk of breast cancer. 2 cups of dairy, 70% increase. 1 cup of dairy per day, 50% increase. 1/4 to a 1/3 cup, 30% increased risk of cancer. A cup of soy milk leads to a 30% decreased risk of breast cancer. There's the data. Soy is actually beneficial and helpful. The standard American diet, however, looks like this. This is what it looks like. It's not good. It's not pretty. So the US food, this is from the Centers for Disease Control, and what we show in the USDA, 12% plant food, 25% animal food, 63% processed foods. The healthiest people that live the longest are referred to as the blue zones. The blue zones, there's 5 of them: the Nicoya Peninsula, the Loma Linda Seventh-day Adventist, Sardinia, Italy, Ikaria, Greece, and Okinawa, Japan. We have analyzed their diets. This is fascinating to look at. So if we look at their diets, what we see, and remember, Americans, 12% plants. Here's the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, 58% plants, big difference. Sardinia, Italy, 63% plants. All right, Ikaria, Greece, 78% plants. Loma Linda, California, 81% plants. And actually, what's interesting, the best health outcomes are in Okinawa, Japan, 97% plants. Wow. So based on this research, our neighbors to the north, Canada, they designed an entirely new food pyramid, which happens to be 88% minimum plants. Wow. Wow. So a healthy diet and lifestyle behaviors could prevent 40% of cancer cases from the American Institute of Cancer Research. All right, so we need to be able to do this. Basing our diets around plant foods like vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans, which contain fiber and other nutrients, can reduce our risk of cancer. Absolutely. Plant foods are good sources of substances called phytochemicals, which can help protect cells in the body from damage that can lead to cancer. So we want to get more of them. All right, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I want you to get that this is absolutely, this is from the American Cancer Society guideline for diet and physical activity. And absolutely, they are recognizing the importance of plant-based diet. So we need to be able to increasing plant-based foods and excluding or limiting red and processed meat to reduce cancer risk. That's what it calls for. So that's the first line. So I recommend a couple of books. There's many, but I recommend these 2. Dr. Sally Lipsky, really brilliant. She wrote this book called Beyond Cancer, fantastic. And then Chris Beat Cancer, absolutely fantastic. Excellent, excellent books. I recommend that you watch this documentary. It is absolutely phenomenal. Heal, change your mind, change your body, change your life. Absolutely fantastic material. One of the people featured in this documentary is Dr. Kelly Turner. Dr. Kelly Turner did extensive research, and what she did is she interviewed people who had so-called spontaneous remissions from cancer all over the world, and she documented and categorized every single one of their habits. What she discovered is that everybody, was over 1,500 people. Of those 1,500 people, there was, I think, over 100 different habits that they had. Nobody did all of those, but everybody did these 9. Number 1, radically change your diet. And what the data shows from her data is to a predominantly plant-based diet. Take control of your health, following your intuition, using herbs and supplements to help you, releasing suppressed emotions, increasing positive emotions, embracing social support, deepening your spiritual connection, and having strong reasons for living. Her book, Radical Remission, became the Bible for working with my client, Bob. So we went to work on this, and it was really quite outstanding. And we used this as a Bible. I also recommend this book, Radical Forgiveness, because one of the major factors when it comes to cancer is resentment. Of all cancer patients, 61% have forgiveness issues. Of those, half of them are severe. So it's really important to do forgiveness work. And I use it with everybody, especially with cancer. And I recommend the book, Radical Forgiveness. Life is not suffering. It's not meant to be suffering. It's just that you will suffer it rather than enjoy it until you let go of your mind's attachments and then just go for the ride freely, no matter what happens. So we need to let go of our attachments. I recommend this for everybody who is addressing cancer. It's a powerful book, The 5 Levels of Attachment. And it's really going to guide you through understanding how we hold on and we have resentments and judgments and assessments of what we're attached to. And that's what holds us back from being able to live a thriving, healthy, happy life. So of all the beliefs to detach from, this is the most important one. Let go of the attachment that you must obtain some image of perfection in order to be happy. That's powerful work, and it really makes a difference when it comes to cancer. According to Dr. Stephen Standiford, chief of the cancer treatment centers in America, refusing to forgive makes people sick and keeps them that way. With that in mind, forgiveness therapy is now being used to help treat diseases such as cancer. Forgiveness is so important because anyone can hold a grudge, but it takes a person with character to forgive. When you forgive, you release yourself from a painful burden. Forgiveness doesn't mean what happened was okay. Doesn't mean that. And it doesn't mean that person should still be welcome in your life. Choose wisely. It just means you have made peace with the pain for yourself and you are ready to let it go. This is critical when it comes to cancer, really is. And as Dr. Wayne Dyer said so eloquently, forgiveness is an act of self-love. It really is. Thich Nhat Hanh said, letting go gives us freedom. And freedom is the only condition for happiness and health. If in our heart we still cling to anything, anger, anxiety, or possessions, we cannot be free. So it really is important for us to choose love, to really choose love. And when we do that, we can start to free ourselves and live a thriving, healthy, happy life. So now there are clearly 4 stages of cancer, not just 3. So the first stage is initiation. Then there's promotion and progression, which we covered before. But now what we're able to see using a lifestyle medicine approach is regression, self-healing and shrinking, supported by decreasing fat, by having a plant-based diet and using forgiveness therapy. Those are the top 3 things. But all of lifestyle medicine is important, including sleep and exercise and hydration. All of it is important. So I recommend these practices for any of you. Number 1, drink more water, eat more whole grains, legumes, fruits, and veggies. Reduce your fat, get to no oil. Move more. Reduce alcohol and smoking. Practice the 9 radical remission practices. Forgive and let go of resentment. These can absolutely help you. So if you'd like to live the rest of your life as the best of your life, it's possible to do so. And I hope you sincerely want to be able to do this. So do this. So imagine for a moment, if you were living your best life, what would that look like? Would it be a life filled with fun, joy, excitement, and activity and vitality? Would you be finishing your life dancing on the beaches of the world, filled with health, energy, and vitality and fun to the very end? I hope so. But the question is, where are you? Are you there now? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. If you're not, how will you get there from where you are now to where you want to be? Well, you need a plan, just like anything else in life. You need a plan, but do you have a plan that's proven to work? Most people don't, especially when it comes to things like cancer. I do. And so this is my 4-point plan. And it was a plan that I instituted when I needed to change my life. 27 years ago, almost 28 years ago now, I was 55 pounds heavier than you see, with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and high blood sugar. And I had to get myself straight because I had issues and I was depressed. And so I instituted my plan, my 4-point plan, to make a difference. So number one is begin from within. We have to recognize that we created our own problems, not intentionally, but subconsciously. And so we need to be able to rewire our subconscious mind. So I began to do that. And I've been very, very blessed in my life to learn how to actually do this. So we must begin from within. Second, we need a proven strategy, and that's what lifestyle medicine provides. And we need a support system with accountability to help us be successful. And then we need a track record of consistency in order to actually produce the habits that we need. This is what I did with Bob. And so everything that I share with you is what I did with Bob. And we started to actually follow this plan to the letter and working everything that I share with you today. And we used Radical Remission as our guidebook to be able to really help us as far as being able to address cancer and every aspect of lifestyle medicine. And as a result, I'm going to stop the share for a second. So as a result of this process, Bob started to do a lot better. He lost weight. He started to feel better. He started to have energy. Yes, he did. He went through some of the treatments for a little while, but we continued with everything that we were addressing: his exercise, his diet, his mental attitude, dealing with his forgiveness, resentment, all those kinds of things. A few months ago, he went skiing in Breckenridge in Colorado, had a blast. Went to North Carolina a month later and went to the Blues Festival and got to listen to music that he loved. He just got back with a short vacation with his family in New Jersey on the Jersey shores. And it's now been over 2 years since his diagnosis. He's going to those 3 weddings this fall, and he's got a new grandchild coming into the world this fall as well. Bob is happy. He's thrilled. And the one thing that he shared with me that was really impactful, he says he has a sense of hope that he didn't have before. He has a sense of hope that he didn't have before. So some of the things that I provide in my coaching, I do lifestyle medicine consultations with people. I help people set up a plan so they can get started. I also do an immersion program where I do group coaching, and it's phenomenal. All 4 aspects of my plan are used. It's not a shortcut, but it really works. And one of my graduates is Donna, and Donna came into my program in 2018. She'd already been plant-based for about 9 years at this point, had lost about 60 pounds, but she still had some issues. She said, "Ruben, I've got atrial fibrillation, high blood pressure, and I have great difficulty walking. I can't walk very much." And so we started to fine tune her lifestyle aspects, all the different behaviors. And she made improvements, so coachable. A year and a half later was 70 pounds lighter right before the pandemic hit. And she didn't let the pandemic stop her. A lot of people let the pandemic stop her. She didn't. So she kept on walking. She got a group of friends because she knew the importance of community. And she walked 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 miles a day. And then at Thanksgiving, she actually did a 10K in 1 hour and 41 minutes. An hour and 41 minutes. She was not able to walk 2 years before. At the age of 69, just remarkable, just remarkable. And then she outdid herself the next month and completed her first California International Marathon, 26.2 miles. So in addition to this, I also do lifestyle medicine for the workplace, and it's just fantastic. I transform organizations. If you're interested, just let me know. This is my contact information. Please feel free to call my cell phone, text me, call me, email me, check out my website. Lots of information. I'll just finish with this slide. Life is not a journey to the grave with the intention to arrive safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride. So I hope you go out the way I'm planning to go out. So thank you for being here. I will answer your questions. If you've got any questions whatsoever, feel free to unmute yourself and we can answer your questions about anything at all, anything at all. Go ahead, anything at all. Any questions? Go for it. You got me. I'm here. Questions, anything at all. Questions. I covered a lot of material, I know. It's a fire hose. Questions, Michael? Questions, Tabitha? Any questions? All right. Well, if there are no questions, I'll say thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you being here. Please, please, please be willing to share this information with your friends and your family. I will send you an email very soon with a recording of this webinar, plus a lot of resource information, including all the slides. So that's forthcoming to you. That's my free gift to you. Please help me in being able to eliminate chronic disease from the face of the planet and to empower every single person to live a thriving, healthy, happy life and make the world a better place for our children, our grandchildren, for the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome, Tabitha. Thank you. You're welcome.